Hey folks, audio editor Matt here, stepping in at the very beginning of the episode to just clear up a few things. One, this episode was recorded before Anne Heche passed away. And two, you're going to hear some audio bleed in very small moments because Ryan's audio track was also picking up Case and J-Mike. I cleaned it up the best I could, and for the most part, you won't really hear it at all. But there are some important key points that Ryan makes where there's some over talking, and I just didn't want to lose the statement that Ryan was making, so it'll sound a little echoey in those moments. But there are few and far between, and for the most part, you won't hear any audio bleed or echo at all. And I just wanted to give you all a heads up. So without further ado, enjoy this episode.
I bought this DVD first day. Like, this was a big deal because the Justice League Unlimited had just ended, so they were doing feature-length cartoons with some of the people who did those cartoons. And I was whole hog on board. Loved it at the time. And then I rewatched it on HBO Max and I'm like, oh, well, the things I like about it, I still like. But all the other stuff, nah, not so much.
Everyone, and welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Case Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, J. Mike Folson.
Welcome back, everybody. Such a pleasure to have everyone here with us today.
I mean, this day is a gloomy one. Some might say a doomy one. Today, we are talking about the animated series Superman Doomsday. And for that conversation, we are joined by Ryan Luis Rodriguez.
Hello!
Hey, Ryan, I'm so glad to have you on finally.
Yes, it is an honor, gentlemen. It is an honor.
The pleasure is all ours.
Yeah, no, I had such a fun time going on Reels of Justice and chatting with you and just like chatting with all of you. You got a great crew over there. But since this is your first time on the show, why don't you give like a quick plug, like what you got going on? But, you know, we can spend more time on it at the end of the episode, too.
Sure. So I'm currently doing 3 podcasts. One is Coolness Chronicles. It is a subjective pop culture history show. Just wrapped up 100 episodes on the greatest thing ever, Mystery Science Theater 3000. And now I'm going to wrap up season 2 with Airplane, the movies and filmmakers that inspired it, and the movies and filmmakers that it inspired rather. It didn't expire them. And once that's over, I'll be doing in October a spin-off called One Track Mind, where I analyze films through their audio commentaries. And I also have the aforementioned Reels of Justice, Fake Movie Court, Judge, Jury, Executioner. I guess not Executioner, but, you know, Judge and Jury.
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of an executioner. If a movie is found to be not a good movie, we toss it out.
And then Tales from the Double R, which is a Twin Peaks podcast where we cover every month a new episode. Or not new, they're all old, but it's new for us because we're just starting.
Right. Yeah, so thank you again for coming on. Now, so you actually suggested today's topic.
Yes, I did.
In that regard, what's your association with this movie? I mean, obviously, we're talking about Superman Doomsday, which is obviously inspired by the comic The Death of Superman, which we haven't talked about yet on the show. Spoiler, we're going to soon. But you brought this, and what's your relationship with it? I hadn't seen it beforehand. I think, J-Mike, you hadn't seen it beforehand, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so, like, Ryan, you're the only one coming in with, like, jaded eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I initially proposed Superman the Animated Series, but you guys already did that.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, well, what's close enough to that I can at least share some thoughts on? And then I realized, oh, of course, well, Superman Doomsday, which it actually bothers to use the Timverse aesthetic to an extent.
So I have some thoughts about that. We'll get into it.
But I mean, like, I bought this DVD first day. Like, this was a big deal because the Justice League Unlimited had just ended. So they were doing feature-length cartoons with some of the people who did those cartoons. And I was whole hog on board. Loved it at the time. And then I rewatched it on HBO Max, and I'm like, oh, well, the things I like about it, I still like. But all the other stuff, nah, not so much.
I can definitely see areas to be, like, negative about it. I will admit, before we go too far on this one, my most recent foray into a pseudo-Dini Superman animated thing was I recently realized I've never watched Superman Brainiac Attacks. And oh yeah, looking back on it, I'm like, oh, this is one of the few things of Superman where I'm like, I wish I hadn't, because it's bad. Like I'm shocked. But look, yeah, and so that juxtaposition right there of like, well, I saw like 2 months ago this pseudo Dini thing that was awful, and then I saw this one which was, you know, B-, C+ maybe, somewhere in that range. Like, man, there's so many thoughts, because there's certainly a lot to vent about. Like the voice cast is fine, but almost all of them are like, it could have been anyone. It could have been the Dini cast. It could have been whatever. I don't feel like any of the stunt casting really brought anything to this whole piece. There's a lot to like with like how they handled some things like Doomsday and whatnot, but like it's a very that part of the story is over very quick, and then you're into a totally different thing. You're doing a worse version of the I think the episode's Identity Crisis, the Bizarro episode of the animated series.
Yeah.
Just out of nowhere. And there's a lot of like conclusions or like ends justify the means kind of scenes that go on in this whole thing that I kept on being like, wait, no. No. But I will say this. I enjoyed doing a clone Superman story and having that clone not there's a part of me where I'm like, it should have just been Bizarro. But there's also a part of me being like, oh, but like we're actually just doing a straightforward, like, no, they got the clone right part. And like, oh, but he doesn't have the right upbringing. He doesn't have like the sociological factors, but he's still innately, like a perfectly functioning Kryptonian clone. There's a lot of comparisons I make, and like, frankly, I compare this to obviously the Bizarro episode of the Superman animated series, but I also compare it to Thalog from the Gargoyles cartoon, where I feel like that's kind of the same thing they're going for, where it's like, here's a program clone of our main protagonist who happens to be physically a thing that no one else can beat in a fight. Okay, cool. Done by our billionaire evil mad scientist character. Okay, cool. And I feel like this doesn't go far enough in a lot of those areas, but it could be a lot worse.
I mean, like they tried again later on. It was like, this came out like 2008, I think, but 2007. Yeah. So they tried it again. It was like 2012 with like the 2-part. Was it? Okay, I got my years mixed up. But yeah, they tried it again. And like, I get some of the reasons that they're different are like things like the Superboy license kerfuffle that happened in the mid 2000s. J-Mike, you remember we talked about this when we talked about the Legion of Superheroes animated cartoon, where they couldn't call him Superboy. He had to be the young Superman. So like, this is an area of time that we're familiar with. Like they were trying to distance themselves from a lot of those properties. I don't know. Like, let's talk about the thing that I think it was like fine, but it happened so early in the movie that's sort of like, well, whatever. The Doomsday fight, like, super early. He's like the first 7 minutes. Like, he shows up. The fight itself is fine with a couple notes in there, but like was overall fine. But it doesn't. It's the name of the movie, but it's like barely the thing that you care about in this movie.
Well, they've never been good at making Doomsday an actual character. When they literally came up with the character, it was, we'll say that it's Doomsday for Superman. And then somebody in the room was like, hey, I got an idea. What if the thing that kills him is called Doomsday? Eh?
Yeah. Like, the comic, I think, has some things going for it that are artistic elements that cannot be conveyed in any other format, such as every issue, the number of panels per page getting less and less until the final issue of the fight is just all splash pages in, like, the Walt Simonson, like, Thor versus the Midgard Serpent style. And, like, that, it's cool that they did that. Like, I enjoy that they're trying to play with the medium. But Doomsday is boring. He's tough and mean, and that's it.
And here's all his dialogue.
Yeah. Well, in the comics, like, every now and then it'll be like Metropolis. Yeah, because like later on, like, he actually speaks a lot in like the animated iterations of, like, was it Justice League show? Yeah, just Unlimited. Yeah.
In Smallville, though, they made him a human that then transforms into Doomsday, which I assume. I didn't actually see it. Yeah, he's a paramedic called Jason Bloom or Davis Bloom, and then they reveal like halfway through the season, he's actually Doomsday. And okay, fine. Huh. If you want to work that character in, that's fine. Yeah, Doomsday's hard to make feel like a diegetic part of the universe. He feels like a plot device whenever he shows up.
And yeah, like the origin that they came up with in the comic is the most ridiculous thing you could possibly imagine, especially how it ties into Superman, where it's like, oh, we're going to just murder a baby, clone it, murder it again, clone it, and that's going to like do evolution somehow. And it happens to be on Krypton, which is why he particularly doesn't like Superman.
That makes more sense, I suppose.
I mean, I thought they handled that part well enough here, which is that we don't talk about it here. It's just, oh, this was a weapon of war that they couldn't figure out how to turn off. And I like things like he had like a robot vision. I thought that was like a cool element where it's just like it's trodden ground of like, oh yeah, we created a weapon and we can't figure out the off switch. Like, I feel like there's so many 80s sci-fi movies like that were like knockoffs of the Terminator, but it was, like the robot went out of control, and like I feel like that's like all over the place, and like this movie kind of is playing with that trope. But I actually think that it at least is like slightly more logical of a reason for why Doomsday would exist.
Yeah, that's fair.
You don't want to kill like a baby over and over and over about 1 billion times until he turns into this huge roided out monster. You don't want that to be in your story case.
Yeah, I mean, like ultimately this Doomsday feels like the Shaggy Man from DC Comics, like the one that General Eiling possessed ultimately.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, yeah, it's a robot that literally you can't kill it. It's just going to keep on coming back. And it's going to hurt people. And, it's fine. But again, it takes up like it's maybe the break into 2, or it might be the halfway point in the movie when Doomsday is like just done. And like, that's it. That's not the movie. That's not the movie you're here for. Doomsday, and then more days after that.
Doomsday and other stuff. That's what it should be called.
Yeah.
Doomsday, kinda.
Question mark.
But I mean, like I said, I thought the fight itself was fine with a couple of spots. Like there's a lot of spots in this movie where Superman doesn't care about collateral damage in ways that I'm like, wait, no, stop. Like, don't do this. Like,
you mean how he like literally launched him into space and then brought him back down in the middle of the city without like going to like the ocean or the desert or
yeah, or when like Doomsday's hanging onto the helicopter that Jimmy and Lois are on, and he like flings Doomsday into a building. And I think they like tried to like I saw a note that they like tried to reshoot it so it didn't show people in the building, but it doesn't matter. Like he threw Doomsday into a building in the middle of a city. Even if it was evacuated, people died because there would just be like shit everywhere. And even if no one died, all of their things were destroyed, which is also kind of terrible. And that's assuming that the building was evacuated in the first place and that the surrounding area was evacuated. Most likely, a lot of people just died.
And a lot of photo albums get messed up, and that's just not right.
Right.
Have some respect for photo albums, people.
And I'm not saying that every single time that there's like collateral damage, we have to talk about how like he tried to avoid it or something like that. But like kind of, he should at least not be making it worse. I think that's the line that like people have with like stuff like Man of Steel, pardon me. I do that all the time. Why did I name the show a plural of a popular movie and comic book series, multiple comic book series? But like the idea that he just wouldn't care about like all these people around him and not be aware of them is I think a frustrating point. And the fight has a lot of collateral damage, and it doesn't feel like Superman has to have that damage be there. Like there feels like a lot of points where the fight is as like unstrategic as possible, and it's just like this brawler kind of fight, and then Superman's like Superman doesn't come off very good in this movie.
No. No, he does not. Like you said, he actively contributes to everything going on. And especially like I forget what scene that was, where it was. I think it was the subway scene. He just kind of like stands there. It's like, oh, the subway coming, and it gets pimp slapped through the concrete again. But he does save a little girl, and that's what matters. The one little girl who comes crying out into the middle of the street for some reason. He's like, oh God, no.
Gotta kill her. Gotta protect her.
I'm already responsible for so many children's deaths. We
gotta save at least one.
I mean, everyone. It's a balance. Like, if you say 50 and are responsible for 50's death, like that's a 0, right?
As Spock said, the needs of the many are to be killed for the one.
Right. But like that fight itself, like the actual fight choreography, I thought was like mostly fine. Like I said, I enjoyed that Doomsday was presented as more of this unknowable alien weapon kind of idea.
Yeah, and I like that he thoroughly hands Superman's ass to him. Like he actually coughs up blood, which I think is the first time that had actually happened in an animated DC property.
Yeah, or at the very least, the amount of blood, like the amount of wounds and stuff. Like it felt like a brutal fight. Like that part, I thought was all. I was there for all of that, and I knew that this wasn't doing the reign of Superman stuff or the reign of the Superman stuff. So I was like, all right, so where's this gonna go? Because this is like 20 minutes in, and then they kind of did. They like filed off the serial numbers and did like a story that's like kind of similar, but like it felt like Full Metal Alchemist versus what is it? Full Metal Alchemist
Brotherhood.
Yeah, exactly. Like where it's like, no, this is the actual ending versus this is the one the anime came up with.
I kept trying to remember why I remember this movie so much, and I was like, there is it. I remember seeing this, and I was like, oh wait, now I remember when he goes to the salon and and lasers a little bee out of his brain. I was like, this is why that movie stuck with me, because I was like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. So rather than doing 4 Supermen and we don't know which one, they just do a clone. They do a single clone, and it's not a Bizarro. It's not. I was wondering if it was going to be Cyborg. Like I was like, well, maybe they're not doing all of it, but they're still doing the Cyborg Superman, which fuck they could have still. Like
yeah.
it's not too far afield from it. But no, it's actually just a straightforward clone who wants to be good, doesn't know how properly, has been programmed with some really fucked up shit. And then that becomes the actual plot of the movie, where it's like this Superman who doesn't have these like human touchstones, like getting worse.
Yeah, you could make the argument that he's a baby. He literally, he could go either way. Depending on that, that's where the real story lies.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually gets to the biggest complaint I have in this, because I think that overall, I think that the animation's pretty good. I think the art style is far enough from the Dini style that it wasn't as for me at least, it wasn't as distracting as like Brainiac Attacks, where it's all the Dini style, but all the voices are wrong and the animation doesn't look as good, but it like still has all the style of it. Like this was better, and like the stunt casting was all fine, I think, but
and Hitch for Dana Delaney is not a fair trade.
It's not a fair trade because she was like capital A acting. She was like, I'm going to prove that Lois Lane can be a dramatic character, and that she didn't.
Adam Baldwin for Superman wasn't a good fit either, because he comes off as extremely monotone in a lot of those scenes.
See, I like him in this. But then again, I was never a big Tim Daly fan, so I mean, I'm prejudiced in that, but. But I mean, the Dana Delaney one feels insulting simply because Dana Delaney has always been a bigger actress than Anne Heche. Like, has more credits, has more marquee value. And also because she's possibly the greatest Lois Lane we've ever had in live action or animation.
Yeah, like full stop, greatest Lois Lane we've ever had. And like obviously like we're not dealing with anywhere near as strong any of the supporting cast, like just across the board. It's just not doing it as well as the animated series.
I will die on that hill. I will stand by it.
But getting to like my actual concern about this, it's that the end of the movie doesn't have like, I feel like the movie had like such an obvious way to make it all fit together really well, which is just have Doomsday show up again for Act 3, and instead Superman kills the clone, and that's presented as a good thing. And I'm like, no, wait, because the clone's a fucking baby. Like you said, like the clone morally comes off as being like still able to learn. And I don't feel like the clone has actually crossed a line that cannot come back from. Like it's certainly like it kills Toyman. Like it's certainly like grimmer than a Superman should be. But it felt like a character that still could learn to be good, or at the very least like repent. It didn't feel like a character who couldn't come back from the line it had crossed, because the line it had crossed was one where it was like trying to do right and it fucked up. But the fact that it's just like, yeah, no, Superman kills him, and like, I mean, Superman's first response when he actually like approaches the clone is to just shoot him with a gun, and like there's way less like, there's no like trying to talk him down. There's no trying to like explain how to help people. I like the idea of Superman having to like fight his like stronger clone self. It felt very much like Samus in Metroid Fusion against the SAX. Like it's just like, oh yeah, this is you at your prime against you now. Like, felt like a classic kind of story to do. But then it's just like, oh yeah, the clone is dying, and like he's like whispers, protect them, indicating that he's still actually like has that same good motive that pushed him too far in the, you know, like whatever his like tragic flaw was is still there, but it's, you know, there's a reason why we like him, which is that he wanted to do good. And it's like, why did the writers not give them a common foe for him to give his life for, so that we could be sad that this clone gave his life to protect people?
Really wanted to have Bizarro.
Well, I did really like, again, the Identity Crisis of episode of Superman the animated series is really good. It's a gut punch where he's like, Superman saved Lois, and he like gives his life. You know, obviously comes back, but like he like in the episode like appears to kill or to die to save everyone else. And I feel like that's what they should have done for this clone. Like, and the easy one is like have Doomsday come back for Act 3 where they have to like team up, and like the clone who we, you know, fought Superman, like keep that, but the clone like realizes, oh fuck, I've been going too far, and like I said, like gives his life, and then you can have this like kind of sad moment at the end. But they don't have that. There's no the movie constantly is being like, Superman's right and any other way is wrong, and they don't do the work to explain why.
Yeah, they don't interrogate it.
No.
Yeah. And Superman does a lot of wrong in this movie. Like, I was shocked when they were like, oh yeah, Superman and Lois are fucking. But she doesn't know for sure that he's Clark Kent.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened.
I think that she would have figured. I mean, yeah, I know the whole glasses thing.
She knows.
But come on. She knows.
Like,
come on. She's getting busy with him. She knows.
Like, it's not the point that, like, she doesn't guess it, because she's smart. Like, they indicate that she's figured it out. But the fact that he's still like, nope, I can't tell. Like, if anyone figures out, like, who I am, they'll come for you. And I'm like, you're already having sex. They're going to come for you regardless.
It's more alluring to have sex with a stranger than it is to admit who you are.
But it's just Superman as fuckboy in a way that I didn't know I was going to be as mad about.
See, I was on board. Because I love it when they reveal when cartoon characters are fucking. That's all. Like Bambi, you know that Bambi and Thumper were getting.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, spoiler for anyone who likes the cartoon Primal, but season 2, Fang finally gets it on, and you're like, yeah, Fang, get it. But here, just like, I'm fine with him having sex, but the fact that he has to be like, no, I can't tell you who I am because that's going to endanger you, is like, that's bullshit at this point. Like,
you've seen me naked, but I won't tell you my identity.
Exactly. Like, I made a note where it's just like the perpetual second act of superhero stuff is the perpetual second date of this. And they're on the third date at this point. They're banging. Like, it should be like, oh yeah, like, people are aware that they are a thing, but like, it hasn't gone too far yet. And that's the lowest Superman kind of flirtation prior to, you know, him eventually telling her who he is. You know, like, J-Mike, as with your favorite character from Invincible, Amber, like, I feel like she should be mad for him not admitting who he is at this point.
Why did you say that name, Case? You're bringing back all that rage. No, but oh man, it was because I was confused because, like, when he's going off on his little, when Clark, quote unquote, is going off on his assignment in Afghanistan, she's like, whatever, see you later, Clark. And then I was like, oh, so she doesn't know. But then, like, the next frame is them sleeping together. You're like, oh, so she knows. But then,
yeah, if it was a ruse, that would make sense. I have that note too.
And I was like, wait, so she doesn't know, but she's still sleeping with him. But then she shows up at Martha's house later on in the movie, and I was like, so she figured it out. But at the very end, he puts on his glasses, and she's like, Clark, and I'm like, wait, so did she know, or did she not know, or did she figure it out, or is she just pretending the entire time? And you said Amber, and I was like, how dare you?
Yeah, I mean, like, Ryan, what do you feel about that relationship?
I mean, it's complicated simply because I don't think that it's rendered particularly well. But I think that there is definitely stuff you can do with that. Like, you know, look at Superman 2. He brings Lois to the Fortress of Solitude, pops some champagne, gets busy with her, and then eventually she puts it all together. Oh, okay. And I wish that they had done something more along those that way, or just have her know from the very beginning.
Yeah, because, like, I rather like the Lois and Ma Kent doing this, like, verbal repartee with each other. They're, like, trying to decode what each other knows at this point. Like, I think that was a good scene, but it just feels like the Lois relationship is too far along for her to still be in the dark for Superman specifically. Because, like, I have a note, like, it felt like the character Captain Dynamo from Dynamo 5, which was, like, supposed to be Superman if he was a fuckboy, and, like, goes around and has, like, women on the side all over the world. And, like, when he dies, his kids find out who he was and, like, all meet up with each other and they become a team of superheroes. Like, that for that setting works. But for Superman himself, and, you know, like, the main property, it feels weird to be like, oh, yeah, well, he's just going to, like, sleep with her and she will never know his name.
He's going to kiss her and make her forget.
Hey, if you want a superpower, just give it to Superman. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. Give it to him and people can explain it away.
Yeah, it's super pheromones. Yeah, that's the ticket.
Also, I was laughing because I was like, I think I've been scarred by all these movies that came out recently, but I was half expecting Martha to turn to Martian Manhunter later on, just because. I was like, please God, no.
We didn't realize that this was co-written by Zack Snyder, but now we know.
I mean, it certainly feels like that.
Yeah, well, that was my only Zack Snyder joke for the day. See me next time.
So I went into this pretty blind. Like, I knew it was Doomsday, but that's all I actually knew about it. I was aware that it was
about Doomsday.
Right, exactly. How would I figure that out? So I wasn't sure how they were going to adapt some stuff, because I just knew, like, okay, yeah, that was the animated movie they made a couple years back. It's about Doomsday. It's the Doomsday fight. Cool. Let's see. And I knew it wasn't Reign of the Superman. But I was, like, pretty blind to it all. So when Mercy shows up, I was like, wait, because she's blonde in this, is this Linda is this Matrix? Is this the Supergirl that was, like, loving Lex Luthor when Doomsday shows up in the comics? And I was curious about that, like, going in. I was like, wait, where is this whole thing? What is this relationship with Mercy? And then Lex just murders Mercy, which just doesn't feel right for Mercy. Like, she's
Matrix
too valuable.
And dodge bullets. But that was really weird. I was like, oh, okay, I guess.
And it's such an interesting relationship in the show.
Yeah.
Like, when she shows up, then you're like, okay, well,
she's got this sort of, like, paternalistic kind of aspect.
But then she gets shot in the head, and that's it.
Yeah, and I was just like, and it was so sudden. I mean, it was like they had been functioning kind of the way we expect them to be. You know, she's a little bit more of, like, an assistant rather than, like, the bodyguard kind of character that Mercy has always been. And then all of a sudden, like, he just shoots her in, like, the kind of telegraphed line of being like, "You've wrapped up all the loose ends." Yes, sir. Well, not the last one. That's you. And then he shoots her, you know, like, but it's very sudden. And it's, you know, the same way the rest of the movie is, where it's just like, oh, yeah, we got to the point very early on, and now all the characters that we care about are gone. You know, like, Doomsday was the fight that we were, like, told that this movie was about, wrapped up, you know, like, in the first third of the movie. Mercy, the character who is, like, the confidant for Lex Luthor, killed off halfway through the movie. Like, each of these things that were like, oh, yeah, this is what, I guess, the thing that we're going to, like, explore, like, Lex Luthor's morality as juxtaposed by this, like, character who, you know, loves him, kind of respects him, treats him sort of like a father figure, you know, all the things Mercy has going for her in the weird sort of, like, fucked up relationship she has with Lex, which is fucked up in a different way than, like, Harley and Joker, for example. But then she's just taken out, and we don't get to see any of that, like, how she sees Lex change over the course of the movie, because he just, like, removes her as a factor.
Yeah, she could actually become an audience surrogate to an extent.
Yeah. Instead, the best surrogate we get is, like, either Lois or, like, the Superman robot, which I hated the design for this robot. I was like, it's not Kalex enough, and it's not, like, a Silver Age style, like, just Superman but a robot. Like, it's somewhere in this, like, halfway state, and I'm like, I hate it.
Well, see, I look at him as an audience surrogate because I am also secretly a robot.
Yeah, but do you have the weird brimmed head that robot has?
Look at me right now. See?
That's true. Oh, sorry. The Zoom background made you look like a normal human being, but now that you've put your hand there, I can see that. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. I see. I see the large dome. That's my mistake.
There was that creepy conversation he was having with the old lady with the cat, and I thought the cat was going to die. I can't be the only person who thought that, because he's, like, stroking the cat, and he's talking to the old lady in this really deep monotone voice about, oh, if I have to stop and save you guys all the time, I'm not going to get anything done. And he just pauses and looks at it for a second, right before the cops show up.
It'd be great if they zoomed in and all you heard was like a chicken bone breaking. And then, whoops! Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean that. That's going to come out, I swear.
Well, and that's the thing, though. Like, that's where he doesn't cross some of those lines. Like, the worst he does is really with, like, Toyman. Like, he threatens, but he gives the cat back, ultimately. So, like, there's all these spots where the clone is presented like, oh, yeah, it's Superman if he had no morals. It's Superman if he was, like, this cold, clinical approach to, like, being a hero. But, they don't really take it in some of those ways. Like, he still has, like, moments where he's, like, language and so forth, where it's, like, kind of an indictment of, like, the Boy Scout approach to Superman. But I don't feel that, like, we have a strong rebuttal. Like, when actual Superman, when Clark comes back, like, all he does is he shows up at, like, a weakened state with a gun and tries to kill him, and then there's a fight, and, like, the fight's fine. But, again, like, because it's still a PG-13 movie and not something further, and they don't want to, like, do too much damage to the IP, the clone Superman doesn't go that far, and thus it's not the Eradicator. Like, that's, like, clearly the idea that we're trying to, like, kind of model it after, where it's a Superman who has no problem breaking the hands of people who he encounters who are, like, robbing a bank and stuff like that, or the Cyborg Superman, where it's all a ruse. It does neither of those kind of approaches to, like, evil Superman pretending to be good, and instead it's just a baby, like we said before, and it could have been taught to do better, and it could have been Superboy, and they didn't have the rights to Superboy at the time, but it could have been just that.
And what bugs me is that if you look at the subtitles, they identify him as Dark Superman.
Yeah.
Which it's like, not really. Like, Dark Superman would have an upside down S, I guess, which just turns out to be an S, really.
Right.
Just with a point at the top. But, as you said, like, he's not that bad. Like, he's really not.
Yeah, and I feel like that just makes it a less interesting conversation. Or rather, that it could have been a more interesting conversation than they went with.
Yeah, that's fair.
But, I mean, like I said, I do come away from it being, like, generally happy that I watched this. Like, I'm glad to do a new take on a replacement Superman that is different than all the other ones that I've seen before. It is different than the Reign of the Superman ones, but it's just they don't have as interesting a conversation as they should have. And, like, it seems so obvious that, like, at the very least they could have him have a little bit of a redemption arc and then die, because at the end of the movie they couldn't have him be alive. Like, he's not that bad. He doesn't deserve to die by the hands of Superman. So what happens at the end of the movie? Is he just, like, Superman's apprentice? Like, is he just training at the Fortress of Solitude? Like, where do you go with this character? Like, oh, well, he's got to die because that's the status quo we have to get to. But he doesn't.
A main character shows up and starts tapping his watch and going, 77 minutes, guys.
Yeah.
Batman.
Like, just a cartoon version of Dan Didio just shows up. Yeah, so, like, it's weird to have that conversation. J-Mike, you brought up the mirror scene, and I do really like that scene. That would have been a good spot if they wanted the character to be revealed to either be the Cyborg Superman or a Bizarro, like, where he, like, burns his face, like, because we don't see the wound. Like, he's not, like, mangled in a weird way. Like, that could have been a good spot for, like,
later. You see it later after it's healed and everything, but that's about it.
Yeah. Like, that would have been a good spot for, like, him to mangle his face, like, cutting it out. And, like, either he's, like, this Frankensteinish version of Bizarro, where instead of, like, it degrading, it's because he literally, like, burned off chunks of his body and it's, like, healing in weird ways. Or, again, a spot where you reveal, like, an endoskeleton and it's like, oh, well, now we're at the Cyborg Superman design. But then we're not getting the end point where Superman in his weakened form is fighting, like, just a representative of his living form. I don't know. It again, it feels like fine, but it's just, like, not as nuanced as I wish it was.
You're right, because he's not inherently a bad Superman, and he doesn't really stand out as a bad character. Yeah, I think in order to differentiate the two, you would have need to have him, like you said, burn his face off or have something deform him to make him seem different than everyone else, because everyone still accepted him as Superman. There was no, like, oh, no, it's not Superman, he's evil. No, it's just, oh, he's still Superman. He's just a little bit more scary. Maybe it was because he died or got the crap knocked out of him that he's a little different now. Maybe he has a concussion, but he's still Superman.
Yeah, or alternatively, if the clones had been used as more expendable, like if Lex had revealed to like kill the clones a couple of times, like he press his remote switch to like turn off the brain by way of a kryptonite explosion, like more than once, so that we could have had like a big moment where like the clone having cut it out is like, we get the scene, but like have it be like a rule of 3, or at least like a previous attempt where we can see how bad it would have been, and then set up that like Lex is sort of like monetized Superman, like made, we see more of his plan, like the idea that he's got Superman, he can kill him when he wants, he doesn't have to deal with him. However, like this Superman is under his control, and then the clone breaking free could be represented as being like, oh yeah, well this was your shitty plan, and now it's like gone out of control because this clone can't be controlled. Like build from there, but instead the clone just immediately like turns off the control devices and is, it's too rushed at that point. Like I would want to spend more time where Superman is dead for a while, and like the world has sort of gotten used to like Superman being under Lex Luthor's thumb, and we, unbeknownst to the world, he's actually like constantly killing these clones and replacing them, kind of thing.
I'm
like
glad you brought that
cool.
up, because my favorite aspect of this entire movie is Lex kind of like the psychosexual angle to his dilemma, where he starts punching him with the kryptonite gloves, asking him, why did you leave me?
That was good.
It is so amazingly homoerotic that I am so in favor of, where the greatest relationships between heroes and their ultimate nemesis is one of like bad romance. Like the Joker is not really complete without Batman, and he knows he can't ever kill him or expose his identity, because if he goes away, then who is he going to have to play with? And I think that by having Lex be so, not remorseful, but just angry at Superman for having the gall to die.
Yeah, and then with that red solar like sex dungeon kind of thing, like I would be way more into like exploring that. And like, I mean, we like James Marsters as Lex Luthor, I thought was perfectly fine. Like, I wish it was Clancy Brown. Yes. Always.
We all do.
I wish every role was Clancy Brown, except for the roles that are supposed to be not scary for me. But like, yeah, Clancy Brown is just going to be Clancy Brown, and one of the most amazing actors of our time. I will love him in everything, be it SpongeBob, be it Highlander, be it Superman, like, be it Earth 2. That's a pull. Mm-hmm. But James Marsters I thought was fine. I thought the gauntlets looked really cool. Like they look like Infinity Gauntlets, like which was great. Can you imagine if it was all the different types of kryptonite?
We got your blue, we got your white, we got your red here.
We got your pink. Yeah. We got all your
Come
colors
and get it.
one.
Come and get it.
Yeah, and then the last one could be gold, and he depowers the clone Superman and then kills it, and then like moves on to the next one. You know, like that could have been kind of a fun idea of like, all right, like if he every time that Superman came in the room, like it always died, may have been interesting, and like because then you're actually kind of working your way from the idea of killing the baby Doomsday every time to this clone Superman's the one that actually is evolving and does it all. Like, so you're kind of like working your way around to like Lex doing the same process that created Doomsday, even if the Doomsday of this movie is more of like an artificial construct kind of thing rather than like the hyper evolved. Like, it would still be fun to sort of like play with that idea of like, eventually you can't just keep torturing things the same way. And eventually it won't play out the same way. Eventually something changes and it'll get out of control. But really, I just can't get over that Doomsday doesn't come back for Act 3. Like, that just seems like the logical way to like bring the Superman clone down.
Well, they filled it. They filled that time with the whole Jimmy subplot, and
oh yeah, we haven't talked about that. Yeah, like Jimmy with like gold chains and
Italian silk.
Or he becomes Andrew Dice Clay. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, how do we miss talking about that part?
Oh man.
Yeah, that's another one where they just don't really explore like some of the ideas that they're playing with. Like it feels like this movie should have had Superman die, and then it should pick up like 5 years later, and like Superman's been gone, but or rather he was gone for a while. He showed up again. It's been weird. He's been very distant, but he's still being Superman, and he doesn't talk to Lois anymore for some reason. And Jimmy is now like, like a fame whore or something to that effect. But I feel like a time gap would have been helpful there, because he's not gone that long, and then he just sort of is back. But like they need to keep moving people into new positions, so they do, even though it's like That's a lot of change for someone who like just started a new job.
But he does like it picks right back up with the whole. We mentioned it earlier, the whole Lois and Martha subplot, and then I was kind of hoping we get more than one Superman robot. I'm kind of mad that it was just that one, because usually in like the animated series it's like 100 of them working around the Fortress of Solitude, and I feel like they did that with the other one too. But yeah, I was hoping for more than one.
Yeah, a lot of robots would be fun, but yeah, it's just like one robot, and that's like kind of weird.
SpongeBob, which is really weird.
Yeah, we get SpongeBob, but we don't get Mr. Krabs.
Hey, one's more affordable, man. What do you want me to say?
Yeah, I'm comparing it with like Brainiac Attacks in my head, because like that one, like the Dini style is even closer and it hurts more. The voices are more egregious, like they don't fit that well, and the styles are weird. This one, everything's like a little bit closer to being right. Like the fact that Lois and Superman don't know each other's real, well, or rather, Superman knows everything, but won't admit his real name to Lois, and yet they're still in like clearly a sexual relationship is like kind of fucked up. And
well, remember, he never lies. So if he doesn't say anything about it, then it's technically not a lie.
My true name is Kal-El.
Oh, you wanted to know my human name? I don't have a human name because I'm not human.
Right.
I'm from outer space?
It's funny because, like, again, I walked away from it being like mostly positive, but like I do have just like a lot of complaints. It's just like, yeah, it was mostly fine fight, and like I wish Superman cared more about collateral damage and people getting hurt, and then he just murders his like clone brother thing for no reason.
And
like,
don't forget the Kevin Smith cameo, trashing giant robotic spiders.
That is true. That was pretty blatant in there, but you know, like.
I do a minor,
give him the work. He's a big nerd. It's fun.
A minor complaint with Lois in like the last fight scene where she's like standing in the middle of all the debris or explosions and nothing's happened to her, and like all the buildings and things are exploding. The glass is falling from the sky, and she gets like a cut in her cheek, but she's like standing there, and nothing is happening to her. The world is dying around her.
Overly dramatic shot.
Yeah, and she's just standing there looking up, like it's not a problem for her. I was like, what the heck? Get out of there. What are you doing? Run, you fool.
Yeah, but I don't know. I'm like, I feel like I'm now like kind of like spinning. Like I have a lot of notes of being like this part would have been better. This part would have been better. But like, again, it keeps on being like, this movie is like almost there, but like doesn't nail it. And like, kind of, like I said, it keeps on feeling like a C.
Yeah. I mean, and you got to realize, like, I mean, this was their first real animated movie for DVD, like not counting like Sub-Zero, which is clearly what that's trying to go for. But this is them trying to say, well, how can we continue these characters after our TV shows? And so there's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be a bunch of stuff that doesn't work, and there's going to be at least some stuff that works. And what they get right, I think they get pretty right. But the problem is what they don't get right is so glaring that it can overshadow what they do get right.
Yeah. Ryan, I'm curious, what would you say is like your favorite part of this? Like, you know, we've cited things that they get right, but like what is the thing that they get the most right?
The Lex stuff and the whole why did you leave me? I think that's the main thing that's stuck in my mind after, like, I didn't rewatch it even after buying the DVD. So this has literally been 15 years. And I remember that thing clear as day. And I was so happy when it happened again, because I was just telling myself, okay, you weren't wrong. That did happen.
Yeah, I agree. Like, that was really strong stuff. Like, the Red Sun sex dungeon was great. And like the opening monologue when he's like explaining how like Superman's kind of in his way. Like, I thought those were good moments for the character. Lex was done well. Like, I feel it's weird that he kills Mercy. Like, I feel like that doesn't feel like Lex right there. But it, like, the vibe of the character I thought was pretty good. And it wasn't distracting to not be Clancy Brown. Like, I wish it was Clancy Brown, but I think that the design's, you know, he's like a little bit slighter. He's, you know, all in a white business suit. He's leaner. He's got like a little bit more of like a wrinkle design to him. So I think that's like the strongest point. I think that Adam Baldwin was going to come off as a prick just in general, because he often does. And as a Superman, he came off as a prick as clone Superman really well. I don't think he came off as like a big counterpoint as real Superman as well. Anne Heche, just like I said, was just capital A acting as Lois. I don't know. Toyman I liked. I did dig that sort of design for the character. It felt kind of like the version that like murdered Cat Grant's son in the comics. You know, like a more of a creeper.
Yeah.
Riding around in giant toys.
Just that weird toy face. And I think that if you're not going to do that per se, to keep up the menace was a wise decision.
Yeah, and like he felt like toxic fanboyism as a villain, and I'm like, all right, I'm here for that. Yeah, but I don't have a lot else to say. I mean, J-Mac, do you have anything else that like really struck you that we haven't talked about?
No, not really. I just I was just kind of, although the fight was fine, the fight scenes and things were fine. It was just really short and very anticlimactic. Like, I mean, like the Superman Doomsday mythos, you expect him to like fight to like the bitter end and like them beating the crap out of each other. You got a little bit of that, but then he like takes him up into the air and like throws him to the ground. They both pass out. I was like, oh, all right, I guess that was fine. But like other than that, like I don't know. The voice actor for Superman just didn't do it for me. I just couldn't get over that point. I was like, oh, he's okay, I guess, but he just seems very uncharismatic to me for a Superman character. Because we're used to like Yuri and like all the other guys, and they're very happy and charismatic. He didn't feel like that to me.
Well, empathetic. They feel like they care about the people they're around. Yeah. The Superman doesn't quite. It feels like even the version that is like normal Superman, like this is a job that he's doing, and he's like kind of begrudged that he's doing this job.
Say for instance, like the scene where Superman flies in and they're both talking to each other right in the middle of the air, and he's like, "What are you doing?" "Well, we don't need you, but I'm back." "Great, we still don't need you." But and that's how that conversation went. It was kind of very
Yeah, Adam Baldwin is not the actor to have a conversation with Adam Baldwin. Like it's not going to be that interesting and dynamic a conversation. The clone Superman and Superman in general like kept on being like protect Metropolis as opposed to the world. And I found it interesting where it was like, oh yeah, I guess the clone could just protect Metropolis and Superman could move on to protect bigger and better things. But they're just going to fight. Okay, they're just going to fight. J-Mike, you brought up a good point though about Doomsday in the fight. One thing I really liked was the speed of Doomsday. There were several spots where like Superman was not able to like catch his breath before he was like under attack again, and I thought that was a really cool element that like doesn't get shown enough. Like that because like
you don't want to see like the typical like DBZ fight where everyone like stands back and gives each other a chance to like catch their breath for like 5 episodes. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And like, because that was the thing about in the comics, like when Doomsday shows up, everyone's like, he's so fast. How do you deal with that? Because he's moving at the same speed as like Superman, which means like just under the Flash's speed. And it felt weird when we see him like not just destroy like normal humans because he's supposed to be that fast. Like he's breaking the speed of sound with every punch.
Yeah, I do appreciate that because like you said, like he doesn't give Superman a chance to like actually catch his breath. And when Superman tries to counterattack, it's always like a backhand or an elbow from Doomsday to knock him back off his feet again. So I was like, that's a pretty good thing they did there.
Yeah. So like the Doomsday fight itself is really good, and like the clone fight is well done. Like the choreography is good for the clone fight. It's just, why is it all what? Why is it this a fatal fight?
It's staged well. That is 100% what it is. It's staged well. I don't know if it's worked out in terms of motivations and in terms of how it serves the plot, but in terms of just breaking out panels, it's not bad.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm happy I saw this. Ryan, thank you for suggesting this, because I don't know if there's such a backlog of material. Like it was always on my list to watch, but it wasn't like going to get bumped to the top without something like, a guest wanting to watch it on the show. So I do appreciate you.
I'm sorry, and you're welcome.
It's the thanks is the more important part. Like I am glad I saw it. Like I said, it could be better, but it was satisfying. I wasn't mad. Everything, like there are a lot of good spots to it, and it's just it could have been better, but like you can see that it's just not. It like you said, it's just growing pains for the animated movies. Like it sucks that we're never going to get a Superman movie that's like the Mask of the Phantasm.
That's a good point. Yeah, that'd be great. But yeah, that's clearly that's not in the cards.
Especially not now. But like, it would have been amazing if they did like some sort of conclusion for the character. But
right after Superman the Animated Series, it would have been great.
Yeah.
That's the perfect time because that's when he's absent from movie theaters. So not only Max and the Phantasm is a theatrically released movie, you could do that again. was no problem. But I guess they were more focused on Batman Beyond at that point.
Right, or then ultimately going on to like Justice League and stuff. Like, yeah, it just they just never had that attention. And like, you know, we know that like Bruce Timm and Paul Dini and all those guys were just like not as into Superman as they were for Batman. And like, you know, I love the animated series. I think it's like one of the high watermarks in terms of like Superman storytelling. But it never had the fan response the way that the Batman animated series did. Like, that's considered like one of the great classics of the 90s. And like Superman the animated series is like oh yeah, that was also really good too, for a lot of people. Yeah. And I think it's underrated in that regard, but I think that like it's true that it's just not the go-to when people talk about the peak of DC animation.
No. Although Mixes Spitalik, come on, he's the best.
I know. Rest in peace, Gilbert Gottfried.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I don't really have that much else to say about this. So again, Ryan, thank you for bringing this. For everyone who is not familiar with you, give your plugs again.
Sure. So Coolness Chronicles, you can find on Twitter at CoolnessPodRyan and The Coolness Chronicles on Instagram. One Track Mind, you can find it at One Track Mind Pod on Twitter, and that's the number 1 Track Mind Podcast on Instagram, and then Reels of Justice is at Reels of Justice on Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. Everyone should go and check that out. Like I said, Reels of Justice I've been on and it was a ton of fun, but like all the stuff you're doing is very cool. But like I hope anyone who's like vaguely interested checks it out and follows on what you're doing, because it was great having you on. It's great chatting with you.
Oh, same here. Absolutely.
J Mike, where can people find you, follow you?
Oh gosh, you're gonna make me do this.
We're almost at episode 100, man.
I don't have anything good to say. You can also find me at Twitter at jmike101. I post funny stories and memes whenever I get a chance to.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Case Aiken. You can find the podcast at Men of Steel Pod. You can find stuff that we're working on. We're doing clips from the show now on our YouTube channel at the Certain POV Media YouTube channel, so check that out. I've also got the Superman analog videos that we've been doing, so those are a lot of fun. Check that out. And then head on over to our Discord server. You can come interact with us directly, get sneak peeks, just chat with us about all the topics that we've got going on for Certain POV. And, you know, you could check out some of those episodes over at certainpov.com. There's tons of great shows that we've got going on. We just are in the 5th season right now for United States of Women, which I'll plug because that's a fun one that I'm really glad came over to our network, which is every single season. The ladies, Jessica and Elizabeth, go through 8 important but underappreciated, underrated women from each state in the Union in the order that they joined the United States. So they started with Delaware. They've been working their way through. They're currently on Connecticut. By the time this episode drops, I think they may have moved on to season 6. But either way, check that all out. It's a really fun history podcast. And then, you know, come and check out more episodes of this show. Like, you know, we've got all. I think at this point we are almost in the closing stretch for episode 100. So we've got some big stuff planned for that. So definitely be checking that out. But, you know, we've just been having a great time talking about Superman content. So I hope you're here for that and for another 100 episodes after that. But until then, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a Certain POV production. Our hosts are J. Mike Folsom and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Matt Storm. Our logo is by Chris Batista. Episode art is by Case Aiken. And our theme is by Jeff Moon.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.